She gave shelter to a homeless man for just one night. What she discovered will change everything. Sarah peered out through her frosted window, her breath a visible mist in the chilly air. It was one of those biting winter nights where the world outside felt impossibly distant, and her own life seemed tethered to the mundane routine of her job as an elementary school teacher. The quaint suburban neighborhood, now draped in a layer of untouched snow, only deepened her sense of isolation. She sighed, wishing there was more meaning, more clarity, more direction. With a flicker of unease, she wrapped her fingers around a warm mug, the cocoa inside begging for her attention. Then a flicker of movement brushed against her peripheral vision, a figure shivering on the sidewalk. She hesitated, emotions wrestling within her. Could it be a bad idea to open her door to a stranger? Yet the nagging voice of empathy drowned out her rational fears. She stepped outside. Mike, as he introduced himself, wore tattered clothes, his thin frame shaking against the cold, the warmth of humanity long forgotten in his eyes. Guilt pricked at her heart as she gestured for him to enter her humble abode, resolving to offer shelter just for this night. As the evening unfolded, cocoa steaming in hand, she sat across from him, mesmerized by the stories cascading from his lips. Tales of a life lived with dreams, a PhD, impactful teaching in a prestigious university, and a personal life loaded with loss. Each word drew her in, pulling at deep-rooted fears. Would her own aspirations slip through her fingers, just like Mike's, if she wasn't careful? The very weight of societal expectations pressed down upon her, forcing her to confront the limits she'd placed on herself, to question the path she had chosen. In today's climate, he said, his gaze piercing through the dim light, it's easy to lose oneself. Sometimes we're just one moment away from everything changing. Before she could respond, a turbulent pulse beat in her chest. She barely registered that Mike wasn't merely a man down on his luck. His history struck her like a bolt from the blue. But before she could ask for more details, his pain echoed through her mind, and she felt a flicker of determination swell within her. Tension rose. Would she dare to embark on her own undisciplined journey amid the remnants of his shattered dreams? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Just as warmth permeated the room, a bitter revelation hit her. Mike was a professor whose groundbreaking research had once promised to redefine educational methodology, lost in the fog of obscurity. Everything about her own ambitions jarred against the collision with his potential reignited. Should she become an advocate for a man whose talent had been crippled by the very system she worked in? Should she channel her energy into helping him reclaim what had been taken from him? An unexpected bonding formed between them, threading the complexities of their lives. She felt both invigorated and terrified. The future yawned open with possibilities that made her heart race and her breath quicken. Would she dare forge a path alongside Mike, or retreat to the safety of her own scripted life, where ambition didn't demand risk? As the night deepened, the air thick with their unvoiced fears and dreams, Sarah felt an unsettling choice pressing at the heart of her. An opportunity loomed on the horizon for Mike, yet the question remained, would they both lose themselves in their pasts or emerge from the shadows together? With uncertainty clinging to her thoughts, Sarah inhaled sharply, steeling herself for the decisions ahead, while the candle flickered, casting shadows that lay ahead. Sarah awoke the next morning to the soft glow of sunlight filtering through her window, the storm of thoughts from the previous night still swirling in her mind. As she prepared breakfast, absently stirring oatmeal, the memory of Mike's stories replayed like a haunting melody, reminding her of possibilities long buried under layers of routine. He had been alive in more ways than one. His aspirations were a vibrant reminder of the life she had been too afraid to fully embrace. What would it mean to commit herself to helping Mike reclaim his place in academia? The question gripped her tighter than the cold winter air outside. It wasn't merely about his lost dreams. It was a mirror reflecting her own fears of mediocrity and resignation. Courage now beckoned her, a siren song that urged her to step beyond the comforting walls of her classroom and dare to reclaim a narrative for herself and Mike. With renewed vigor, she crafted a plan. After school, she would visit the local university library, searching for resources on advocacy in academia and ways to get Mike reconnected with his former colleagues. The adrenaline quickened her pulse, and for the first time in years, the thrum of purpose resonated in her chest. She needed this for herself as much as for him. After an exhausting day of teaching, filled with the cocoon of routine and the familiar chatter of children's voices, she found herself in the library, surrounded by texts that smelled like ambition and untold stories. She immersed herself in the rich documentation, papers outlining successful reintegrations of former academics, strategies employed at community support centers, articles emphasizing the importance of mental health resources for those in academia facing similar circumstances. A few hours later, papers strewn around. Her heart flooded with a mix of excitement and trepidation. Mike's plight was far from unique. A sizable network of individuals struggled against the very systems meant to support them. If she could remember his stories and weave them into advocacy, perhaps she could help break the silence around him. The injustice of it all ignited a fire within her. In a quiet moment, as she scanned one particularly poignant article, surrounding her was a quiet realization. She was learning about herself, too. She was not just a caretaker, but a potential catalyst. Somewhere along her journey of self-preservation, she had forgotten about empowerment, both for herself and for those who had lost their way. This was her opportunity to reclaim her narrative, not merely as a teacher of children, but as an agent of change in a community that had grown increasingly indifferent. Excited by the spark, she made her way home, her heart racing. Could she find the courage to confront her colleagues, to champion Mike's cause to people who might dismiss him? A daunting silence filled her thoughts. Could she endure potential scrutiny or rejection? Upon her return, she found Mike sitting at her kitchen table, the ambiance warmer than the luminescent glow outside. She sensed an unspoken kinship broiling between them, pulsing beneath the surface. Eager to share her findings and plans, she caught his gaze and firmly stated, "I want to help you, Mike. We can navigate this together." A flicker of hope ignited in his demeanor, but along with it, a shadow of doubt emerged in his eyes. He appeared both grateful and hesitant. "Are you sure? This could lead to rejection," he cautioned, shifting in his seat. "Maybe," she replied, steeling her resolve, "but I refuse to let fear dictate our paths any longer. Together, we might redefine what success looks like." As she spoke, she felt the burden of traditional expectations begin to slip away, replaced by a tangible strength. Taking the first step felt daunting, yet exhilarating. Just as they started to sketch out a plan, a loud knock at the door shattered the hopeful energy. Sarah glanced at Mike, nerves racing again. Who could this be? The uncertainty was palpable. "Do you want me to get it?" he asked, a flicker of protectiveness in his voice. "No," she replied, her heart pounding. It was time to confront whatever awaited them on the other side. Determined to face whatever storm would greet her, Sarah opened the door, bracing herself for the unknown. Behind the door stood a figure cloaked in authority, a detachment radiating from their presence. Both thrill and dread gripped her. The moment had arrived. Her choices would carve a new path, but at what cost? The quiet urgency in her heart, now louder than ever, urged her to confront whatever lay ahead. As Sarah opened the door, her breath caught in her throat. The figure before her was a university administrator, unmistakably distinguished, yet imposing, holding an air of authority. Both thrill and dread gripped her. The moment had arrived. Her choices would carve a new path, but at what cost? The quiet urgency in her heart, now louder than ever, urged her to confront whatever lay ahead. As Sarah opened the door, her breath caught in her throat. The figure before her was a university administrator, unmistakably distinguished yet imposing, holding an air of authority. That made her instincts flare. "Ms. Andrews," the person said, their voice measured and cool, with an edge that pierced through the layers of uncertainty. "Yes, that's me," Sarah replied, a mixture of determination and apprehension swirling within her. "I received some reports that you've been investigating potential advocacy for reinstating Mr. Mike Daniels in our department," the administrator said, their eyes scanning Sarah's face with unsettling intensity. "I wanted to discuss this matter before you proceed any further." Her heart raced, gears turning in her mind. The very essence of her plan hinged on Mike's reinstatement, yet a sense of dread unfurled, anchoring her to the spot. Was she prepared to face a figure so deeply entrenched in the academic hierarchy? Someone potentially resistant to change? "Of course, I believe he deserves a second chance," Sarah said, mustering each word like a shield. The administrator raised an eyebrow as they stepped inside, the coldness trailing behind them. "Do you understand the complexities involved? The scrutiny this entire inquiry will attract?" Sarah paused, calculating her response. "I believe he has been unjustly marginalized and that his contributions remain overlooked. I am advocating for him because I believe in the value he can still offer academia." The administrator's expression softened momentarily, but it was fleeting. "Belief is commendable, Ms. Andrews, but the academic community values more than belief. We require evidence, a solid foundation to address claims like his." Each word resonated like a challenge. The realization struck Sarah hard. Advocacy wasn't merely about passion. It needed strategy, clear plans, and undeniable proof. She couldn't afford to falter. "I'm aware of that. That's why I'm researching the pathways, the support systems, and connecting with other individuals who have faced similar challenges. I want to compile a compelling case." Compelling cases are not built solely on personal connections or emotion, the administrator pressed, folding their arms. "This is an institution grounded in data and reputation. You must prepare for the backlash if you pursue this path." The weight of their warning bore down on her like a leaden anchor. What if she had overstepped her boundaries? What if Mike's story was too fragile to resurrect in a world that thrives on undermining vulnerability? Yet, as she held the administrator's gaze, something shifted within her. She realized that her own fears mirrored their cautionary words. Could she mold her ambivalence into action? "I can handle the backlash," she stated firmly, feeling the flames of resolve stoke within her. "Mike's story needs to be heard. I'm willing to bear whatever consequences for giving him a voice." The administrator regarded her for a moment, a flicker of something, approval perhaps, but it was fleeting, buried under layers of institutional responsibility. "Very well," they said, "I will support your research, conditionally. Share documented findings with me before you approach further. You may need backup instead of a battle." Relief teetered on the edge of anxiety. This was an opportunity dressed in ambiguity, a tentative alliance forged through shared ambition. Yet the administrator's final words echoed ominously. Backup, not battle. After the administrator departed, Sarah felt both exhilarated and unnerved. She had secured tentative ground to build upon, but an intricate dance between advocacy and institutional hurdles now laid ahead. What allies could she find, and at what cost would they come? Later that evening, as she shared her encounter with Mike, she could sense his growing apprehension. "Do you really think you can handle all of this, Sarah?" he asked, concern etched in his features. She took a deep breath and fixed him with steady resolve. "Not just for you, but for all the others who feel unheard. I can't back down now." Mike's silence weighed heavy, insistent thoughts reflecting in his gaze. As they forged ahead, shadows of doubt loomed larger, but Sarah knew one undeniable truth. Stepping forward meant embracing the unknown, but also igniting a movement that reached deeper than any solitary dream. Tomorrow would demand more than research. It required courage and strategic action. The next chapter of her journey had just begun, the stakes gradually rising. As she prepared to face the challenge ahead, a sense of foreboding settled in. What if the very system she sought to challenge struck back harder than she anticipated? The reality set in. The time had come to define success on their terms, but would it lead them to salvation or further entrench them in adversity? As dawn broke, casting a muted light across her cluttered desk, Sarah felt a renewed sense of urgency. The fading warmth of the previous day's determination clashed with the rising tide of anxiety, washing over her like cold water. She needed to chart her course with precision now, not just for Mike, but for herself. Advocacy had always sparked something deep within her, yet she recognized that it demanded more than passion. It required shrewdness. Her phone buzzed with a message from an academic colleague, a fellow researcher she respected. "Let's meet today at noon. I have some insights you might find useful." The prospect of support propelled her thoughts forward. She needed to be strategic, not merely reactive. Knowledge could fortify her resolve against the backlash threatened by the administrator. By midday, she found herself at a coffee shop, the clattering of dishes contrasting sharply with her intense focus. Her colleague Alicia arrived, settling into the booth across from her. The familiar warmth of their rapport helped to ease some of Sarah's tension as she launched into the details of her quest to advocate for Mike. Alicia listened intently. "You're right about one thing," she replied thoughtfully, "but evidence isn't just about statistics or formal arguments. It's also about narratives. You need to frame Mike's story as one of resilience and redemption, not just failure." A flicker of realization ignited within Sarah. She had fixated on the institutional formalities, but the human element of Mike's narrative held transformative potential. What if I gathered personal testimonials from students he's impacted? Alicia's eyes, "That's it! People connect through stories. Build a narrative that demonstrates his worth through the eyes of those who have benefited from his mentorship. It will serve as compelling evidence." Feeling a weight lift, Sarah's thoughts raced. She could visualize a strategy, not merely researching factual support, but creating a tapestry of human experiences that illustrated Mike's affirmative impact. She envisioned interviews, raw and real, each voice painting a different facet of the man they sought to restore. "It's not just evidence," she mused aloud, "it's a movement of voices." However, lurking beneath her excitement was the gnawing reminder of the hazard she faced. The administrator had warned her about pushback. They wouldn't take kindly to emotional appeals in a realm so entrenched in data and statistics. But Sarah thought of Mike's struggle, and the need for justice began to trump her fears. "I want to create a network of support," she stated, resolute. "I'm reaching out to those who know him best, gathering their stories, and preparing a report grounded in empirical findings with a personal core." They spent hours brainstorming, crafting a plan that entwined emotional storytelling with rigorous analysis. With each passing minute, Sarah felt herself shedding layers of self-doubt. She was growing, evolving into not just a mediator for Mike, but a catalyst for change within her academic environment. After their meeting, Sarah took a deep breath and stepped into the rhythm of the day. Armed with a clearer vision, she began reaching out to potential allies, students, former colleagues, anyone who could lend a voice to Mike's cause. But challenges emerged swiftly as some expressed reluctance. "It's risky, Sarah," one former student said hesitantly. "The department won't like this." Her resolve tightened. It was deeply uncomfortable to push against the boundaries of established norms, yet she couldn't retreat into passivity. "Risk is the foundation of progress," she countered, the words spilling forth with a fierce conviction she hadn't fully realized she possessed. As she delved deeper into organizing her campaign, the stakes grew ever higher. The pressure intensified, weighing on her shoulders like a heavy backpack filled with stones. Would the stories she gathered be enough? Her next step was to confront the administrator again, not to seek permission, but to assert her findings with confidence. What would the response be? Would they appreciate her narrative approach, or would they view it as an increasingly bold affront to their authority? Feeling the electric pulse of determination surge through her, Sarah knew one thing. This was no longer just about Mike. This was about her emerging identity as an advocate, stepping into the arena of academic with the courage to confront the system she sought to challenge. But would her newfound strength withstand the test of institutional resistance? The clock was ticking, and the looming confrontation awaited. The realization struck her with unsettling clarity. She was about to face the very gatekeepers of the change she sought. The next morning dawned gray and overcast, mirroring the storm brewing within Sarah. Each tick of the clock felt like a drum roll announcing her imminent confrontation with the administrator. She paced her small apartment, her mind a tumult of thoughts, strategizing every word, every gesture she would employ to assert not only Mike's merits but her own. She decided to spend the morning gathering her own notes, bullet points of key statistics, interspersed with emotional anecdotes she had gathered thus far. The balance of solid evidence against the narrative flair was critical. As she reviewed her materials, an idea sparked. This meeting could be a pivotal moment, not just for Mike, but for her burgeoning identity as an advocate and an active player in her academic field. Determined, Sarah crumpled her earlier outlines, infused with self-doubt and fear of pushback. Those were no longer representative of who she was becoming. Instead, a focus document emerged, one that intertwined testimonials and hard data, forming a comprehensive narrative that illustrated not just Mike's impact, but the systemic flaws that needed addressing. As noon approached, Sarah dressed in her sharpest blazer, a statement of purpose that reflected the inner transformation she felt. She practiced her opening lines in front of the mirror, rehearsing their weight and force until they became second nature. The confident image staring back at her ignited a fire within. She no longer saw herself merely as a mediator. She was an advocate, and it was time to step into her role. Upon entering the administrator's office, the walls seemed to shrink around her, echoing years of institutional power dynamics that felt stifling. The administrator was seated at a vast desk, reviewing files as if Sarah was just another uninvited interruption. The tension between them mounted, and for just a moment she hesitated. Yet as she recalled the voices of the students she'd spoken to, the conviction surged back. "Thank you for meeting with me," she began, her voice steady. "I believe we need to address the situation regarding Professor Mike directly. I've gathered data and testimonials that illustrate his positive impact on countless students. This isn't simply about defending an individual. It's about recognizing the value of mentorship and the resilience it fosters." The administrator glanced up, his expression a mixture of skepticism and intrigue. "You think personal stories will change the facts of his performance?" "Not just personal stories, but a narrative that highlights the very fabric of our academic community," Sarah replied, forcing her gaze to hold his. "These testimonials are backed by metrics on student satisfaction and success rates. They illustrate a broader issue where the human element is often disregarded in favor of dry statistics." She shared excerpts from her document, leading with student quotes that captured their gratitude, their struggles, and the profound influence Mike had on their lives. The administrator shifted in his seat, at first unmoved, but slowly the edges of his disdain began to soften as she narrated the stories that brought Mike to life in vivid, multifaceted color. But even as she rallied against the dispassionate facade of bureaucracy, she could feel his resistance hardening like concrete. "You realize, Sarah," he interjected, "you're playing a dangerous game here. Advocacy has its limits. This isn't a charity." "Then let's treat it as a partnership. Here's what I propose." Her words opened a pathway. For the first time, they were discussing solutions rather than defensiveness. A small victory she clung to as hope melded with ambition. Yet somewhere within her heart, a fierce tremor of apprehension disrupted her confidence. How far could she push? As the conversation progressed, doubt began to coil around her confidence like a creeping vine. Was she truly prepared for what would happen if he responded with decisive pushback? She could feel the stakes escalating, her pulse quickening with every minute. This wasn't merely advocacy, it was a potential tipping point for both her and Mike. What she had revealed so far hung precariously in the air, offering glimpses of change, but the depth of institutional resistance remained unmined. "Sarah, let's be clear," the administrator finally stated, leaning back, the breeze of authority surrounding him once more. "You may not have considered the backlash of going public with this." A jolt of realization surged through her. The implications of her actions could cascade beyond her immediate environment, further isolating her from colleagues and administration alike. The tension was palpable, her resolve hung by a thread. But within the confines of her fear, a question bloomed. Was she prepared to confront the inevitable consequences of her choices? Determined to stand her ground, she straightened her posture. The moment of truth haltingly approached, but deep within, a spark flared. Would she choose to harness that power for transformative change, or would she shrink back from the overwhelming push of institutional authority? With one final push of courage, she resolved. She would not walk away from the challenge. "I'm ready for this," she whispered to herself as the next confrontation loomed. Was she brave enough to face the storm? The administrator's eyes narrowed, a glint of understanding playing at the corners of his mouth. "You're prepared to bear that weight alone. These stories won't insulate you from repercussion." Sarah fought to keep her composure, feeling the room pulse with the unspoken challenge between them. "This isn't just for me. It's about creating a culture where student success stories matter." She steadied her breath, forcing a calmness she didn't quite feel. "You're aware of the shift in higher education. We need to adapt or risk irrelevance." He leaned forward slightly, intrigued, though still skeptical. "And you think you're the one to lead that change? What makes you think your voice will be heard above the noise?" It was a stark question, one that dripped with implications about her professionalism and authority. Yet, instead of retreating, she felt a surge of defiance. Her journey thus far had sparked something inside her, a belief in her own voice that had previously been muted. "Because I've listened. I know what's at stake, and I refuse to let administrative protocols stifle the very people who drive our mission." The tension coiled tighter, electric. Each moment they spoke detracted from the strict hierarchy she had been conditioned to accept. She realized then that she wasn't just pushing against the administrator, she was confronting the whole system. And there, amidst her fears, she found clarity. "I won't back down, not when I know what's at stake." If we ignore the voices that matter most, we ultimately sacrifice our integrity. His expression turned contemplative, and for the first time, he leaned back ever so slightly, as if weighing her words. "You might be right about the value of mentorship, but let's not kid ourselves. The path you're considering, it's treacherous. Are you truly prepared to navigate it with all that might entail?" Treacherous is the only path worth walking, Sarah asserted, her words bursting forth with renewed vigor. If we stay silent out of fear, we become complicit in our silence. A rush of adrenaline swept through her. She could feel the solid ground of her principles beneath her. The administrator viewed her with an assessing eye, and for the briefest of moments, she thought she glimpsed a break in his facade, a trace of empathy perhaps. But as quickly as it emerged, he masked it, retreating back behind a wall of administrative detachment. Bold words, Sarah, but the reality is that change doesn't come easy. I suggest you tread carefully. You may find more enemies than allies. Those words struck her hard, resonating with the weight of truth. Enemies might arise, she knew that, but allies could also be hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone brave enough to seek them out. Then let's navigate this together. We can build a framework that protects mentors like Mike while also upholding institutional standards, she proposed, steering the conversation away from confrontation and towards collaboration. The administrator regarded her, the muscles in his jaw twitching as he considered her proposal. They lingered in silence, a moment suspended in time as both of them weighed what this would mean. In the depths of her being, Sarah felt a flicker of hope, a potential turning point. And yet, as she looked into the depths of his eyes, she suspected there were other forces at play. Would he truly embrace a path that could lead to greater change, or would he instead tighten the reins, casting her efforts aside in favor of adhering to the status quo? One deep breath steadied her. Shifting her strategy from defensiveness to initiative felt like a risk, but she was prepared to embrace it. As they continued their dialogue, another realization struck. She needed names, supporters within the faculty who believed in her vision and wouldn't waver in their resolve. Let's set up a follow-up meeting, she proposed, her resolve sharpening. I can gather testimonies from other faculty and students who will stand by these principles. Together, we can craft a more coherent narrative that respects our community's needs. He regarded her with a cautious nod, the merest hint of approval sparking in his eyes. Very well, Sarah. I'll think about your suggestions, but tread lightly. The academic world is rife with politics. Trust is hard won. With those words exchanged, she stepped out of the office, her heart racing. She had managed to plant the seeds of advocacy. She had taken the first step into the open, though thorned and treacherous. She could sense her path would be riddled with challenges, but it was a path worth traveling. As she returned to her office, her thoughts spiraled outward. Who would she recruit to join her cause? What stories would they share? With every question she posed, a new determination flickered to life within her. It was no longer just Mike's future hanging in the balance. It was an entire culture that needed reimagining. Pausing by her desk, Sarah's breath came quick. Was she ready to unburden herself and expose the vulnerabilities of this institution? The time had come to confront her fears directly. No longer simply the mediator, she was ready to champion a campaign that would either elevate her or illuminate her vulnerability. The next phase loomed ahead, daunting yet invigorating. She felt an electric charge of purpose propelling her forward. The pivotal moment awaited, and she wondered, would she have the courage to embrace the depths of transformation that lay before her? With the door of her office firmly closed behind her, Sarah leaned against it for a brief moment, gathering her thoughts as adrenaline coursed through her veins. The exhilarating tension of the conversation lingered in her mind, igniting a whirlwind of possibilities. The stakes were high, but the prospect of change was even higher, and she felt compelled to act. The first step was to identify potential allies. The faculty lounge was often a sanctuary of camaraderie, where conversations flowed freely. Sarah decided to pay it a visit, her heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and anxiety. As she walked through the dimly lit corridor, her mind was a cacophony of worries and hopes. Who would she approach? Who would have the courage to stand with her, to share their stories and experiences? Entering the lounge, the smell of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the muted sounds of laughter and discussion. It was a familiar setting, yet today it felt charged, as if the atmosphere itself anticipated her mission. Spotting Mike alone at a table, Sarah felt a flicker of reassurance. He was a storyteller at heart, his experiences invaluable to the narrative she sought to cultivate. "Mind if I join you?" she asked, her voice steady despite her internal turmoil. "Not at all. What's up?" Mike looked up, his eyes brightening with the simple acknowledgement of her presence. She took a seat, the weight of her initiative pressing her into the chair. "I had a conversation with the administrator earlier. It went surprisingly well. He's open to the idea of reforming student mentorship, but I need support to back it up." "What kind of support?" His brow knitted in concern, but also curiosity. "I want to gather testimonies from faculty and students who care about the direction we're headed, voices that matter. Are you in?" Mike paused, his expression contemplative. "You know I'd speak up for the students, but others, they might not be as willing. The risks." "Exactly," Sarah interjected, her confidence swelling. "But isn't that what we're fighting against? A system that rewards silence over integrity?" He nodded slowly. "Count me in, but we'll need to be strategic. Not everyone will welcome a shift in the status quo." "Right," she agreed, her mind racing. "We need to build a small coalition first, enlist those who understand the importance of the stories we want to tell." As the two strategized, the inklings of a plan took shape. They discussed potential faculty members, those with reputations to protect, yet who harbored a passion for mentorship. Sarah could see that Mike was beginning to believe in the vision they were crafting together, momentarily enveloped in the promise of change. However, Sarah's confidence was dampened by the memory of the administrator's warning about trust being hard won. She found herself questioning who among their colleagues might be willing to risk their standings to join this cause. The memory of her own fears resurfaced. Would they all be brave enough, or would complacency win out once again? As the conversation unfolded, another voice piped in, Linda, a young faculty member known for her innovative teaching methods. "I couldn't help but overhear," she said, her tone earnest. "Count me in, too. Now is the time for these stories to come to light." Sarah felt a surge of warmth flooding her chest. This was the first spark of something larger than herself. But with each commitment came a flood of responsibility. "We'll need to have a meeting to hash this out, to align our goals and gather our data," she replied, feeling the heaviness of leadership settle on her shoulders. As they plotted out their approach, Sarah realized the challenge ahead was not just logistical. It was deeply personal. She would have to bridge the gap between her ambitious ideas and the fears of her colleagues. Every decision could open a pathway or threaten to unravel their burgeoning alliance. With the adrenaline of newfound momentum coursing through her, Sarah left the lounge, invigorated yet laden with the enormity of what she was aiming to accomplish. The groundwork had begun, but it felt almost agonizingly fragile, an intricate web that could be easily torn apart. However, amidst her excitement, a shadow of doubt crept in. What if those she counted on faltered? What if she wasn't enough to keep the dream alive? The desire to push forward clashed with the haunting uncertainty of failure. As she made her way down the corridor, her thoughts sharpened. She needed more than allies. She needed a plan that could withstand scrutiny and challenge. A list of potential stories began to form in her mind, each one a thread in the fabric of her vision. Suddenly, the weight of intention became electrifying. Would those around her rise to meet it, or would the fear of their own vulnerabilities silence them? As the door closed behind her once more, she took a resolute breath. The journey had commenced, yet the looming question remained. Would she have the strength to navigate this path amidst the swirling uncertainties, or would her efforts unravel at the first hint of resistance? The sun dipped low on the horizon as Sarah settled back at her desk, the weight of her aspirations heavy on her shoulders. She opened her laptop, each keystroke echoing the pulsations of her heart. But her fingers hesitated. The screen was a blank slate, mirroring her mind, filled with thoughts yet void of plans. The conversations from the lounge echoed in her ears, a chorus of hope mixed with uncertainty. She needed clarity. The goal wasn't merely to gather voices, it was to transform those voices into a coherent, compelling narrative that could sway even the most resistant. Images of her potential allies played in her mind. Their enthusiastic acceptance contrasted sharply with her nagging doubts. Would they stand strong when the heat turned up? Would she? Sarah decided to map out her ideas. It felt like a strategic war room with her goals pinned against the walls of her mind. She pulled out a notepad and created 3 columns: allies she could count on, potential stories worth telling, and strategies to rally support. With each line she wrote, she felt herself cementing the foundation of her dreams. However, the notion of confrontation unsettled her. Disagreements within the faculty could expose raw nerves. Her personal doubts gnawed at her. Each of those names she wrote down on the notepad felt like a double-edged sword. They could amplify her voice or become obstacles, pushing back against the very change they claimed to want. The quietness in her office was disturbed by a knock on the door. It was Mike. "Got a minute?" His tone was light, but Sarah sensed a deeper urgency in his presence. "Sure, come in," she replied, gesturing to a chair across from her. "I thought about our strategies earlier," he said, leaning forward, enthusiasm speckled with caution. "We need something concrete to show those who are hesitant. The stories, yes, but also statistics, proof that change is warranted." "Absolutely," Sarah nodded, her mind racing. "We can collect data on mentorship outcomes, perhaps interview former students to see how the lack of mentorship has affected their experiences." Mike smiled, the spark of collaboration igniting between them again. "And we can craft a presentation, make it visual, impactful." The idea resonated within her, a rhythm of action brewing. "I'll draft it tonight. If we can show real impact alongside anecdotal evidence, it may convince others to join us." But even as her resolve strengthened, another layer of complexity loomed. How would she address those who were bound by tradition, who viewed mentorship as merely a system of credentials rather than a realm of influence? They were bound to see any shift as a threat rather than an opportunity. "Keep in mind the resistance we might face with the board," Mike added, his brows knit together. "Some powerful voices will oppose any changes to the way things have been done." His words echoed in her mind, planting seeds of doubt. She'd need to prepare herself for critique, possibly even hostility. Would she falter under the pressure, crushed by the weight of others' dissent? "Let's frame it as an enhancement rather than a change," she suggested, the gears in her head turning. Focusing on enrichment over disruption could shift those perspectives. As they brainstormed, Sarah found herself awakening dormant abilities she never knew she possessed. The clarity of purpose fueled her. She was discovering a talent for leadership she had previously dismissed. The challenge was morphing into a chance for growth, a way to assert her place not just among her peers, but within herself. The meeting she planned with her allies would require all this. They would need to be resolute in overcoming fear. Her growth wasn't just about the mentorship program. It was a sculpting of her own identity amidst adversity. Could she embrace this newfound role without losing herself along the way? As night fell, Sarah felt a surge of anticipation. This was her moment to step beyond the boundaries she had confined herself to for so long. The faint glow of her laptop screen mirrored the flicker of determination igniting within her. But with each rush of urgency came the looming reminder of vulnerability. Behind every idea lay the potential for offhand rejection or doubt. Would she be strong enough when the battle emerged, or would hesitation wash away the foundations she was trying to build? That night, Sarah resolved to push through any uncertainties. But even as she wrapped up her thoughts, she couldn't shake the question. How would she confront the unexpected, the barrage of criticism that felt almost imminent? In that moment, the search for answers deepened. She needed to reach within herself and find the strength that could weather the storm approaching on the horizon. Would she rise to the occasion or retreat into the shadows of doubt? The answer awaited her as she prepared for the battle ahead. The following morning, the air hung thick with a sense of approaching challenge. Sarah stood in front of her mirror, scrutinizing the reflection that seemed to bear the weight of decision-making, of newfound expectations. A fleeting pang of doubt darted through her consciousness. What if her efforts were futile? The potential backlash loomed over her like a storm cloud. Yet beneath that anxiety, there lay a glimmer of resolve. She picked up her notebook, flipping through the pages filled with her raw ideas and strategic plans. The lists provided comfort, solid reminders of what she had been building. It was time to take action, to manifest her vision into reality. As she meticulously prepared for the day ahead, there was an unyielding pulse of determination driving her to confront the potential resistance head-on. Arriving at the faculty meeting room, Sarah could feel the tension in the air, a cocktail of eager anticipation and simmering apprehension. The room filled quickly, colleagues taking their seats, murmurs weaving through the space like electricity. She took a deep breath, grounding herself. This was her moment. With Mike at her side, she stepped up to the front. The initial slide of her presentation flashed onto the screen, highlighting the stories of past students alongside stark statistics reflecting the ramifications of mentorship deficiencies. The room quieted to a hush, all eyes now resting on her. Sarah glanced around, searching for familiar faces that she hoped might offer encouragement. As the presentation unfolded, she became increasingly animated, the words flowing like a river that had finally broken through a dam. She focused on articulating the necessity of mentorship, not just as a teaching tool, but as a bridge to personal and professional growth. Each story she presented painted a vivid picture, a tapestry of experiences that evoked empathy. Yet the swells of enthusiasm were met with resistance. An esteemed colleague, Dr. Reynolds, interjected with an edge of skepticism. But isn't it too subjective? Data-driven arguments hold weight. How do we quantify the impact of mentorship? The doubts in the room rippled as more voices joined in, echoing traditionalist sentiments that questioned her approach. The familiar knot tightened in Sarah's stomach. Each counterpoint felt like a bullet against the armor she was trying to build. She could sense the weight of their expectation, and for a moment, vulnerability clawed at her resolve. However, she quickly collected herself, remembering the conversation she had had with Mike. Sometimes the most profound transformations are not purely quantitative, they're qualitative. Look at the stories from our alumni. They are the living testament of how mentorship can change lives. As she spoke, a shift occurred. The realization that her voice carried substance began to resonate in the room. Even amidst criticism, she saw glimmers of recognition in the eyes of her colleagues. Slowly, she transitioned the conversation back to empowerment, urging them to reconsider mentorship, not merely as a duty, but as an investment in the faculty's collective future. The room remained attentive, and as the presentation came to a close, Sarah felt a flush of pride bubbling within her. Her vulnerability had morphed into strength, a capability to stand firm against skepticism while advocating for change. She had confronted her fears and emerged fortified by the knowledge that leadership isn't merely about authority, it's about the willingness to seek understanding amidst opposition. Yet, as the discussion shifted toward implementation, the underlying tension didn't dissipate. Instead, it morphed into a more insidious concern. What if the proposed ideas were met with a more organized resistance? What if factions formed, targeting her directly? As the face of this change, the prospect chilled her. As she left the meeting, each step echoed with promise, yet uncertainty lingered in the periphery. She would need to strategize carefully, ensuring she gathered allies without igniting hostility. The mounting challenge ignited a flicker of excitement within her. This was not just about a mentorship program anymore. It was a pivotal growth moment in her journey to becoming a leader. And as night approached, with the day's successes washed over by looming trials, she sat back at her desk, her thoughts racing. The stirring realization dawned within her. The battle was not only external, but internal as well. How would she continue to cultivate her leadership identity, especially when faced with opposition that threatened to undermine her confidence? As the shadows danced across her room, Sarah couldn't help but feel that the defining moments were yet to come. She would need to deepen her resolve and uncover the strength to face not only her colleagues, but the inner critic that clawed for her attention every time she wavered. The stage was set. The next act awaited her decision. Would she embrace the storm or shy away? The dawn found Sarah seated at her desk once more, a cup of coffee growing cold beside her, her thoughts spinning like the gears of an intricate clockwork. The meeting yesterday had been a defining moment, a blend of victory and uncertainty. She had articulated her vision, but the pushback weighed heavily on her mind. With each counterpoint raised against her, an inner voice persistently questioned her ability to lead this initiative. Yet, beneath the apprehension, an ember of resolve burned brighter. Sarah had transformed from a decipherer of students' needs into a voice advocating for change within academia. This was not merely a mentorship program anymore. It had turned into a personal odyssey of her own evolution. Driven by purpose, she opened her laptop and began drafting a communication plan to galvanize support for Mike's reinstatement. This plan would spotlight the power of personal narratives paired with compelling data. She knew stories alone wouldn't suffice. They needed to be fortified by measurable outcomes, the quantitative analysis that would appease skeptics. Hours flew past as she combed through her notes, implementing critiques from the meeting. She identified key faculty members to reach out to, those who echoed her commitment to student mentorship and progression. With every email sent, a wave of anticipation washed over her, filling the cracks of her earlier doubt. That evening, determination surged once more as she revisited the student testimonials she had collected. Each story was a star, illuminating the dark expanse of traditional academic attitudes. They spoke of choke points that had suffocated dreams, visions dimmed by institutional blind spots. As she pieced together their narratives, Sarah felt that these weren't just stories of struggle. They were testimonials of resilience, rallying cries for change. The next morning, with a tight tether of purpose anchoring her, Sarah organized a roundtable discussion with Mike, Linda, and a few other supportive faculty members. Each represented a different facet of the collective will: the innovative teacher, the former student, and the advocates who craved a community resonant with mentorship and accessibility. As they convened, excitement rippled through the atmosphere. Mike shared his experience teaching before the events that had derailed his career, his narrative woven with poignant moments that illustrated the need for a supportive academic environment. Linda contributed by embedding data points from recent educational trends, highlighting the gaps in mentorship that stifled student potential. "I don't just want us to advocate for Mike," Sarah proposed to the group, her heart pounding with each word. "I want us to draft a comprehensive proposal that addresses not only his situation, but underscores the value of mentorship as a systemic necessity across our institution." Her eyes locked with each member, seeing reflected in them the same fervor that blazed within her. They worked tirelessly that afternoon, brainstorming and constructing their manifesto. The energy became palpable with each sentence crafted, every idea exchanged, until their draft emerged as a powerful declaration, grounded in hard data, yet rich with human stories, intertwining personal and systematic narratives into a strong, unified voice. However, doubts crept back into her mind as they finalized the document. What if their proposal was dismissed? What recourse would they have if it was met with ridicule? "We can't be paralyzed by fear," Linda countered, sensing Sarah's hesitation. "Fear is what we're fighting against. It can fuel change if we let it." That strength fueled the resolve bubbling within Sarah. They truly believed in this. Together, they would bring about transformation. As they finalized details, Sarah glanced out the window at the clear autumn sky, a stark contrast to the turbulence she had experienced just weeks prior. She could see now how far she had come. From a solitary figure, she became an architect of potential, surrounded by allies supporting a shared vision. With the proposal polished and schedule synchronized, the time arrived to present their findings to the administration. The day of reckoning loomed, yet Sarah felt no fear. Rather, it was confidence that filled her. She clutched the printed proposal tightly, her heartbeat steadying as she retained her focus on the mission ahead. As they entered the administration's meeting room, an air of gravitas surrounded them. Each member of the committee looked more intimidating than the last. But Sarah felt different. The energy in the room transformed into determination. A coalition not just ready to advocate for Mike, but for all the students and faculty who had similar experiences. As she began presenting, Sarah's voice rang with conviction. The proposal she and her team had created was compelling. She interspersed data with vivid accounts from students, weaving them into a narrative that showcased the urgent need for a culture shift within their institution. The tension in the room thickened, yet as she closed her presentation with a call to action, asking for their support in mentorship reforms, she felt lighter, as if she had shared a truth that could no longer lie silent. "Thank you for your time," she finished, her eyes capturing the attention of the committee. "Change requires courage. Let's not shy away from it." The silence that followed was deafening, a stillness that seemed to stretch into eternity. Then a senior committee member leaned forward, a contemplative look crossing his face. "This proposal illuminates an issue we have overlooked for far too long. We must prioritize these values." Cheers of uncertainty, then gratitude lurked in the shadows. Yet there came agreement from the others, a collective acknowledgement of the significance of what had been presented. Relief washed over Sarah, intertwining with pride, the realization of what they had achieved. The burden she had previously felt began to lift, reinforcing the truth that she had become the advocate she needed to be, both for Mike and the faceless multitude yearning for a mentor. As the meeting concluded, she stepped back into the sunlight, breathing in the fresh air, feeling as if she had broken through a once impenetrable barrier. Wrapped in the warmth of camaraderie, she embraced the realization that this journey was not only about Mike's reinstatement, it was about her growth, her competence reaffirmed. Standing amidst her friends, pride surged through her, and she grinned widely. "We did it," she whispered, feeling the sincerity in the air around her. They had banded together to demand transformation, walling off the silence that had too long muted the voices crying for change. Bearing a weight of profound satisfaction, Sarah realized that her transformation had been comprehensive. She was now recognized, not just as a teacher, but as a change maker, capable of influencing institutional narratives. And in that moment, she knew deep down, she had conquered her fears, reclaimed her ambitions, and accomplished something monumental, not just for herself, but for a generation yet to come. She stepped further into the daylight, embracing the new course she had charted, poised to navigate whatever challenges awaited, energized by the profound understanding that authenticity was the most powerful tool in advocacy. Now was the time for every voice to echo, and her heart brimmed with anticipation for what lay ahead. Subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share. True fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of these actions.